All right, here we go. November the 23rd, 8 a.m. Pacific. There has been some debate back and forth as to what time it is in UTC because of daylight savings. So we'll get that clarified. Sorry about any of the confusion. We also have a new Zoom link with our new Vanity Zoom URL. So everyone that made it as a participant in this call, you're in the right spot. Anyone who is struggling in another Zoom room waiting for me to start that Zoom room, I apologize. We'll hopefully get that clarified as well. All right, jumping in, we do have a similar agenda as we normally run, talking through our metrics, some program updates, and then there's a number of open FIPS, some community updates, and then some discussion topics. So I think first we'll jump into our metrics from one of our dashboards, and then we'll have some time to have a conversation about some other dashboards that are popping up. So pulling the metrics from our DMOB dashboard snapshot as of yesterday, we're seeing average time down to 2 days with time to DataCap in the past 30 days at 1 day. So feeling really good about that. Direct notary interaction time, we're still seeing about 11 days. So hoping to keep working on that. First response from a notary is at 6 days, feeling good. And then looking at some of our DataCap funnel. So a really interesting thing that we noticed in the DataCap funnel breakdown. So on this side, we have direct to clients from notaries versus clients from LDNs. So in the notary, direct notary interaction, about 30% of the total DataCap that's been given to the notaries has gone to clients. And then 12% of that amount has gone down to deals. For LDNs, it's only 2% of the DataCap that has been kind of put at that top band of LDNs has gone to clients. That's because each LDN that gets created is requesting currently up to 5 heavy bytes. So that's at that top of the funnel, and then it flows down from there. So 2% down to only 1% being used in deals. This funnel has also been running for less time than the direct one. But the interesting thing that we noticed that I want to call out, there's a pretty similar percentage drop from client to minor storage provider being 40%. So of the amount of DataCap that has been given to clients and both pipelines, 40% of that is being used in deals, which, there's some interesting stuff to kind of unpack there, but it could be a few things are happening. Either clients that get their DataCap, 40% of those clients are using all of it with storage providers. So they get it and they use their total amount. Or of the clients that get DataCap, out of all of them, they are all using some of their DataCap down to about 40%. But in some ways, they are sort of holding on to an amount of DataCap. So there could be, it's probably a combination of both of those things. It's not going to be like that cut and dry that it's one behavior or another, but it is just an interesting similarity. So pausing here, and we're going to talk through some other dashboards that have come up. Deep, was there one that you wanted to pull up first?
Not necessarily. We can go in either order that you'd like. I was also planning to flag these as part of the 6-month, or I guess Q1 goals, but I'm down to discuss it now too.
Oh, okay, we can come back to it.
Yeah, should I give you the link to both of them here?
Yeah, go ahead and chat me a link, and I'll get those pulled up. We'll go through the direct notary activity, and then we'll talk about the dashboards in the program updates.
Yeah,
changing the agenda live. So direct notary activity. Currently, as of yesterday, there were 27 open issues in our client onboarding repo, approximately 8 in the last week, which is a little bit of a slowdown. We're seeing 253 granted issues, 15 in the last 7 days. That's about similar to what it was before. And then the number of applications getting a response from a notary is about 63, with clients being similar to what it was 2 weeks ago. About 24 out of 79 of the clients are getting DataCap per month. So here's our wonderful table breakdown. And another update that we'll talk through, we are making progress on a Notary leaderboard to kind of have another great, clear, visible web surface to highlight how fantastic all of our notaries are doing. So from there, let's talk through, someone finally updated this slide header. We've been talking about it for months, and we did it. So our Fplus Q1 for 2022 goal updates. Pete?
Thank you very much. So yeah, just running through these, I think you're all getting pretty familiar with this like general framework of thinking across these different areas. So I'm just going to get right into it. The first of which is volume, and the general goal that like DataCap should be abundant and available for both notaries and for clients. We had this goal of wanting to get to 50 petabytes of DataCap available for giving to clients at the end of Q1. We're making pretty solid progress from that. The current number has just crossed 100 as of last week, which is massive. So big congratulations to you all. And then just straight up in terms of DataCap that's been like generated in the ecosystem, that's now around 150, which is very close to 150, which is a big deal. The delta between those two is effectively now when LDN apps come in, they may often get an LDN that has DataCap before they're even approved to receive DataCap. And so in some cases that data, like that multi-sig is like written off and doesn't end up like giving DataCap to a client because the client never actually gets approved through due diligence. And so I prefer tracking this as the number of LDN applications that have like received some kind of DataCap. But then I take the number on top, which is the total amount that's been put into the multi-sig for them, and add all of that up. And so that number is 98.5. And we're now with about 8 petabytes through the regular Notary elections that's still being dished out, and only about, I think, 40-ish% of that is actually out and used. So making good progress. I think we, of course, like, you know, we're not there yet, but we do have several months, and we're no longer like an order of magnitude off from this. And the utilization of this DataCap is also going much better in that, like, even though from that like 98.5, only, you know, 2 petabytes or 3 petabytes have made it to clients right now. So in total, I think client addresses have received more than 5 petabytes of DataCap as of last week, and that's also a massive milestone. Congratulations to all of you. That is epic in terms of the amount of DataCap that is available in client addresses today for deal making. So even though we're not no longer like that much of a delta, because like 6 months ago that's how much DataCap existed in the network. So it's great to see like the order of magnitude improvements since then. We still have a lot more to do here. The main things I want to call out here, like improvements to the Ldn flow. I think there'll probably be even more to come on that. And in general, like figuring out how we can make the notary role a little bit more lighter weight and more consistent in operation from the standpoint of like where it creates overhead, not necessarily like making the role easier to do from like a thinking and a subjective analysis perspective, because that's the whole point of having humans in the loop, but rather make the things that the humans need to make decisions more accessible, more easily accessible, and have better UX. So that like the actual cognitive overhead of you as a notary saying, oh, I need to go review my applicants or look at the Ldn applicants and decide one way or another, that goes down because the tooling is fun to use, or it's nice to use and everything is working, which is not the case today. As many of you've seen, you've run into a bunch of issues with the interop between the bot and GitHub. There are random things like certain messages that are being signed aren't showing up. Some of the DataCap that's being granted doesn't show up correctly in GitHub, and so people end up signing a third message as opposed to approving the second one. We now have a third proposal in the mix. And so there's still work being done on that actively every single week to try and improve that pipeline. Promise you lots of improvements have been made. It was a lot worse 3 weeks ago, but we still got some work to do on that. What we're trying to do there is also build in a little bit more transparency, because a lot of what's happening with the tooling today is like we'll hear feedback from you or see issues, and then we go disappear off into this little room with the team. And you guys know the team because we've tagged them in a bunch of threads and things like that. It'd be great to get a little bit more transparency in that, so that you can also see how some of that tooling is working and where it's being effective and not. And so we're going to try and make a little bit of an effort to make those things a little bit more public. Second up, time to DataCap, my favorite metric. So this is directly correlated with building a low friction client onboarding experience and ensuring that clients actually have a good time getting that DataCap and getting to use this network to onboard their data, because we need that to be a good experience for this to actually have demand show up and be served correctly. This one, I think we're still quite a ways away from our goals, other than on one front, which is that I think in general, the community is in agreement that we'd like to get automated verification path up to much more than just 32 GB. So the number we've been tossing around is around 1 terabyte. There's a whole GitHub discussion on this last month, and lots of folks in these calls were generally supportive of that. And so we'd love to put that into the next steps in terms of implementation. Now, it'll be interesting to see if verify.glyph.io wants to take that on as part of their Notary function, or if it turns into like a different way in which we achieve this. So I think the push on that front, at least on my end, will probably be like figuring out with you guys like what the right shape for that is and what the level of KYC needs to be. Like, is GitHub still enough? Like maybe we start with GitHub and change it. I don't know, but like the more tactical discussions need to start happening on that. And so I'm excited to see the difference that will make. Other than that, I think we still got ways to go. At least we're improving the transparency side of things. The reporting is improving, and we'll get to be better informed about how things are actually happening. Kay Ray has also joined the team, for those of you that didn't meet him at the previous Notary governance call, and he's specifically focused on the Notary experience. And he and I have been talking a little bit about like the general Notary dashboard leaderboard thing that I think I showed you guys about a month ago. And so hopefully that will come into fruition in the next months or so. Then to go to the next slide. Sweet. Risk mitigation standpoint, we've got 2 dashboards that we've been showing for a long time. The excellent Fplus.info built by Laura and the FileDrive team, and then the long URL that Ldn and I have been working on. It also looks like as of last week, there's actually 2 new dashboards. There's pluskit.io and atpool.com. Made one where on their main Athena Explorer for the blockchain, there's a DataCap statistics. You can see Galen is showing you with his mouse. And so they've got like a whole like DataCap statistics as well. Firstly, great work to both these teams. Awesome to see, I didn't even know that this was being worked on. I know the ATP one, somebody had mentioned that they were looking into it, but I don't even know the team behind pluskit.io. And I like the unique stylization of both of these. I like the UX, the UI, it's pretty neat. It's also great to just see additional like independent thinking in this space, but also for the integrity of the program and the integrity of the data, right? Like having over reliance on one methodology is probably bad. And we definitely want to have like access to more reliable data tracking and transparency in how like DataCap itself is working, how the system is working, so that we can build more informed opinions without bias, or with reduced bias, ideally, on the general state of the system. Though, if you're watching this video and you built one of these, please let us know in Slack. One, it would be great for you to come present them at a call like this. And this goes to all of you here that you didn't even build this, but might be building on other things. So for example, the Matrix Storage team was here about a month and a half ago and talked about some of the tooling they're building for notaries. These calls are a great place to share progress that you're making on projects that you're building in the system. And so please feel free to come and do a little presentation and chat with us and see how you can continue improving, developing, and partnering with different folks in the community. But also, secondly, if you're working on this, make sure you also give us a way to give you some feedback. So whether that's in Slack or elsewhere, do let us know, because I think in general, we're also finding that there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the data across all of the 4 dashboards. And since Laura's in the call, actually, I wanted to propose like maybe it's worth doing like a dashboard sync, either at this call or at like a separate call that we can stand up, like maybe once a month or something, where we chat about like data discrepancies and just data integrity, so that the pipelines themselves are robust and people can rely on them. Or alternatively, it would also be good to have like a min requirement of what a dashboard needs to be for us to like talk about it a lot or use it. And I think one of those things is probably like we need to start publishing methodologies, like how are people actually tracking stuff on the network, how is it being processed, and how is it therefore showing up on a dashboard. Galen, you got a hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to pause because I think there were some questions. I think Julian mentioned a question when we were getting started about one of these. I want to make sure I captured his question.
Yeah, I think Julian's question, Julian, don't let me speak for you, but as far as I know, it was basically wanting to see the methodology for how they were tracking notary statistics on pluskit.io. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. I did ask in Slack to see where we can give some feedback and learn more about it. So hopefully we hear back from the team soon. I think that would be good. There's like an efficiency parameter, right? Which is like a per region.
What about how do you guys usually measure it? Because I mean, this efficiency is measured for like, I think a long time. When we applied last time, we talked about it also. So I just wanted to know, like, do we have to just close the issue as soon as possible, or like each time there is a new comment, it's just like pausing until the client is answering again, and all of that? Because like I have an example, right? I have one client, they sent like 2 requests in parallel. So I just work on one and I say I'm pausing the second one until the first data cap is completely consumed. But is it what I'm supposed to do, or I should just close the second one and then just reapply again later on?
That's are those requests for the same project?
Yeah. No, it's 2 different data sets, but yeah, still it's 2 slingshot. So
I think that one is up to you. In general, like the thing is that there's like an aspect of this that needs to be better where the clients know what to give to a notary upfront. Like today we collect such basic information, and then each notary has a set of questions that they post, and then the clients go back and come back like a week later. I think where like we could improve a little bit, and like a general topic of conversation I wanted to have in the open discussion today, so I'm not going to preempt this too much, but was around the idea of like having more consistent types of things being asked in due diligence. And I think the right boundary probably is geographic, like on a per like country basis or geopolitical basis. Like what can we do in the app that basically says, oh, it looks like the notaries of Europe or the notaries of France like believe that, you know, at least these 8 questions will be answered. They have to be answered. And then maybe there's more beyond that. So instead of just asking for address and company name and email, let's also put those 8 questions right up front. So that the client is prepared, can go do that work and come back and cut down that initial week that's being lost today and reading those questions and having to do the analysis to get back with that data. And then I think there's the second angle of effectively, like, even if, like, I agree with you that like counting the amount of time it takes the client to do like their own preparation should not be counted against like a notary's capability in delivering. But at the same time, it does count against the general like client onboarding user experience that like the Filecoin network presents, right? Because if it turns out it takes them 4 days to do that prep work or 5 days to go like talk to their teammates and come back with those answers, then their delta between when they thought they could start making deals to when they'll get to make deals is going to be longer, or the amount of preempting that has to be done by a client and the overhead that they have to take to like anticipate needing DataCap increases. And so things that we can do in the system to prepare them better upfront to get that data upfront and reduce the amount of interactions is probably like my interpretation of what you're saying is like we just need to focus on that as much as possible.
Yeah. So in that specific case, I mean, I was not more talking that much about the process and what the decision I should take, but more like to understand how the KPI is measured so I can take the decision by myself, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think if you actually, Galen, if you pull up pluskit.io and you scroll down, this is very similar to what Andrew Hill's dashboard also does, which is like you've got like allocated, and you've got average time. I don't know in this one if the average time includes allocated or unallocated. For our TTD that we are measuring, which we have not published on a per notary basis yet, because I don't think we're actually like tracking it on a per notary basis. We're currently just doing it averages for the ecosystem. We look at allocated specifically. So we look at the time at which the first request came in from a client to the time at which the message was posted to the chain. And that's the amount that's like TTD. And then we average that across all the applications. So if a client delays by a week in responding to you, that counts against you, or that counts against the system, I guess, in this case, because we're aggregating that for everybody and then saying, oh, like Filecoin Plus on average, it takes 11 days to get DataCap.
Okay, so and do you also do that for multisig?
We're trying to do that for multi-sig. It's currently aggregated and rolled up into the same thing. What we're working on right now is separating it so that we can say, oh, for LDN versus not for LDN and for individual, because we'd like to see that broken out, because I think that will also be a good lesson for systems design perspective for the community on like, do we even like this model? Is there a better model, or do we want to move more? Because if it turns out the multi-sig is working better, it's closer in the step of like more automation, more like a DAO anyway. Maybe we just start like figuring out mechanisms to turn that into how like groups of notaries work, right? So if it turns out like a lot of notaries have a consistent due diligence process, then maybe we just, instead of applying to one notary, you apply to a group of notary every time. And that group is determined by like the same type of due diligence process and the region that they're coming from, or something like that, or the language they speak or something. And so that turns into a better mechanism. So I think it's absolutely paramount that we track that separately. And so we're working on that pretty actively today.
Okay, last question. What's the average time you are targeting?
So on the previous slide, sorry to do this, there you go on the left, this is our goal, which is for an allocation that's less than 1 terabyte, it should be less than an hour. And for 1 to 100 terabytes, it should ideally be in a day. And I think anything that's beyond that, which is like bigger scale, massive scale data sets, we probably need more time. And so that turns into more bespoke. Today, where we are is even for 1 terabyte, the average TTD is 11 days. And for like anything that is more than that, which often ends up in LDN, like greater than 50 pretty much ends up in LDN all the time. That ends up being like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And so actually what we also should do is split this out into 3. We should do like a 0 to 1, 1 to 50 and 50 plus, or 1 to 100 and 100 plus, something like that. So we can differentiate across like, oh, you came in with an automated verifier, that's 30 seconds. You came in to apply to an individual notary or a group of individual notaries, that's like a day. You came in, you applied to LDN, that's also a day or something like that. Or maybe LDN is expected to be faster because there's even more notaries. But in general, I think there's also this aspect of needing to correlate. And I think this was brought up by Kabi earlier on, the notary from Bushi, where it's ironic that sometimes the LDN process is easier than some individual notaries' processes. And that should not be the case, because we should better correlate the amount of data cap with the amount of trust being established to the client. And so that's like a general like problem space that I've been trying to do a little bit of thinking about in the last couple of weeks, which is like, how do we propose better mechanisms where like clients are effectively like, if you really step back and you look at this system, clients are being rewarded for what they're able to share about themselves in a way, right? Like it's like the more KYC you can do, the more trust you can establish, the more likely it is that you get verified deal making on the network at scale. And so you're almost trading off like the completely anonymous nature of the internet for benefits in deal making. And so if you can prove that you are an entity with high reputation in the world, and you can do that in many ways such that we can't doubt it, then arguably you should be considered as somebody that is worthy of receiving whatever data cap is required, versus somebody who is unable to do that or doesn't have as much generic reputation in the outside world. And so correlating the trust that you establish with the access to this resource a little bit better is probably just a general thing that I would recommend everybody thinks a little bit about, because that is like an existential thing for this program, in that we have to be able to do that right in order for this to be truly useful for everybody that's coming to the network.
I'm going to speed us up here because we have some other like bigger discussion.
I think we can skip these. People
topics.
Can take a look at this.
So yes, we are at a similar place with some of these other updates. Check out those other dashboards. We're going to try and get those teams here. So there's some open FIPS that we want to talk through and bring to the attention of everybody, because they are for the entire community, but they're sort of specific to the Filecoin Plus community. So there's FIP 203, proposing that we I haven't read through all of the comments up to date yet, but effectively, I think they're proposing that we remove notaries entirely and just give anyone any amount of data cap, which is a controversial opinion, I would say, for the people on this call. Their argument is that the notaries are creating centralization, and so, they are proposing that we get rid of notaries. I think that some of the other takeaways we flagged here is like, what is the notary role in the election process, and how could those things sort of evolve to maybe, is it centralized? How could it be less centralized in the long term? Is it a current high priority that it needs to be the most decentralized as possible based on the status of the network? Those are some questions, which also lead to kind of questions around the goals of the Fplus program. So this one, is in here. Fifth discussion, removing the Fplus notary process. It currently has 8 different comments, so go check that out. I'm going to pause here and see if anybody had any top of mind questions or opinions, having already read this one, that we wanted to capture here, knowing that I am not the author to defend or argue any of the statements made. So just pausing to see.
Yeah, so I've been going back and forth a little bit on this one. I will probably continue to. I do think that there's some interesting claims being raised and some thinking areas for us, but I don't think so far, I feel like I have not yet been surprised. A lot of the stuff that is being flagged as valid criticism is stuff that we've all talked about and we're actively trying to work on. There's the more generic Filecoin Plus itself is centralized because we elect notaries and then those notaries have their own process and therefore dictate in a centralized way the future or whatever of a client. And I think that's fair, but I don't know if I would term that as centralized, because ultimately the process for selecting those notaries is discussed or decided in a slightly more decentralized fashion, and that role is today very, very select. But I think that that's probably going to change as we scale up the operation. There's probably going to be more notaries. There's probably going to be some notaries that are able to engage at a much higher level and some that aren't able to engage at as high a level. And so I think as we continue to develop the program, I think the original fear behind this post will slowly abate. It also creates this, he also creates this interesting point on do we just want to revert to people who can stake to make decisions, to follow the decentralized model of if you have fill, you stake the fill and then you get voting power and everything depends on that. Or just give everybody data cap because everybody should just get to make deals for free kind of a thing. I think both of those are valid thought experiments and could be worth discussing. So I would recommend, if that's interesting to you to engage on, please take a look at the issue and let's continue the conversation there.
Okay, I don't see any other hands coming up. So the other open FIP, which I think we talked about 2 weeks ago, we may have talked about both of these, was DataCap Management. This one brings up initially brought up 2 specific questions to add and remove, or to add 2 different commands, to transfer data cap and to remove a verified client. I believe that where this has trended is that those are 2 separate proposals that have different implications, and agreeing with this FIP doesn't necessarily mean that we have to agree with both. I think that a lot of conversation has, for the question of should we be able to transfer data cap from client to client, has trended to no, that we don't feel that that is a necessary or appropriate use of data cap and of the program. However, to have an ability to remove data cap from a verified client and remove a client and further remove a client from the verified registry is something that would be useful, and there are a variety of different use cases to do so. So what we wanted to sort of talk about here today with this team of notaries is specifically, what if we were to add a new command, how would that specifically work? if that command is to remove DataCap from a verified client address. Now, I want to pause and make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. We are not discussing changing any deals. So if a deal is made with DataCap, that is out of the scope of this FIP. We are only talking about if there is a client address and that client address has an amount of DataCap allocated to it. Should we, can we, and how would we change by removing that amount of DataCap? And like we've said, there have been various use cases where I think that this is an appropriate thing that we should have the ability to do. Some of the ideas that we've come up with here, maybe this is a message that requires 2 or more of the notaries. Maybe it needs 2 notaries and 1 root key holder, 1 notary and 2 root key holders. And then there's also a question around, inactive. If a client address has had DataCap for a certain amount of time and not used it or not made deals, we could also decide what does inactive mean. If they're making deals on the network but not making deals with DataCap, are they active or not? So there's some questions there. So before we shed our opinion on some of these ideas, just wanted to see comments from the experts here. Show of hands, unmute and jump in.
Also, I mean, if there's any other ideas, this is just like me chatting with Gillen yesterday after we went to one of the implementer syncs, which is like the team working on various implementations of the spec and resulting in things like Lotus and Venus and stuff being built. And their ask was effectively like, yeah, feel free to recommend something here because I don't think they have an opinion and they're looking to us as a community to do that. And so these are just to get the conversation started. I'd love to hear if people have ideas, better ideas, other thoughts on like a good scalable way to do this.
Hey, so hope I can be heard. It's Danny here. So I guess my question here is how many root key holders are there? Like when we say 2 root key holders, are we going, does it make sense to express that as a number of root key holders or a ratio of the total number?
Yeah, so I think right now there's 4 or 5 organizations that are signed up to be root key holders, and we're actively in conversation with at least a few more. The aim is to get to 7, and so it would be. And there's like some proposals for re-architecting how that would look that will show up as like FIP proposals in the near future. TLDR of that is effectively like the denominator that you're looking for is still probably going to be 7 per the original system design that was proposed. So when it says 2 root key holders signed, that's like 2 signers of representing 2 entities or 2 organizations out of 7 organizations that are currently part of the set of root key holders, which is the same as what it takes today to get a notary created.
Right.
So that's the same threshold. And so arguably it could be a little bit too conservative because like this is just like removal or grounding from a client, which is, I think, slightly less consequential than removing or grounding DataCap to a notary who then gets to do that for a client.
Yeah, I guess it would be hard to programmatically define a sort of ratio, but speaking of someone who was initially like instinctively kind of against this proposal because it's been kicking around for a while, I think that at least having some collective action, if we're going to do it, should be the way of doing it. But that's probably obvious. Thanks for thinking it through.
Do you still have like any serious concerns that are worth flagging? It's also a good time to do that. About this is specifically for removing verified status or removing DataCap from a client. And the cases, as Gillen described, are inactivity or like known fraud / like a dispute thing, because we finally have a consequence that we can use in the system.
Yeah, yeah. I want to think it through a little bit more, but I don't quite see, and maybe there's a discussion in this, what the issue is with sort of inactive client accounts, because it's not like we're returning that DataCap back, or it has any use if the client isn't active. But
yeah, so the two sort of like inactive use cases that have come up in my mind that people have discussed, like one of them is you have lost access to that address, right? Like you lost that wallet or whatever, and so
right.
in a situation like that, you're like, oh, I can no longer get to this amount of DataCap,
Right.
and it sits there and it's inactive, and we want to clean that up. But the other goes to for inactivity, goes to like a sense of statistics and kind of usage, right? So that if we say, well, how are these mechanisms working? How effective is our system? How efficient is it? If we are giving DataCap to people through a certain pipeline and it is sitting there for 6 months and not being utilized, that is going to like color all of those dashboard like metrics for what the program as a whole is accomplishing. And so by having a mechanism to remove those inactive people, it shows a better picture of like, well, the people that are actually trying to use DataCap, how is the system working for them? So in that way, our like dashboard metrics are more effective. It also, I think, creates a mindset in a client that while this is not a, this is supposed to be a limitless, abundant resource, but also it is a resource with purpose, and the purpose is not to hoard it. The purpose is to have it flow through the system. And so to create there's an incentive to make deals with your DataCap, and that incentive is we will take the DataCap away if you're not using it the way that it was intended to be used, right? And so in that way, it's kind of like it also is meant to be a bit of a prod to not hoard a thing that does you no good sitting at your client address. And then there's also like arguments for if you are a client who is just going and either you have gotten some amount of DataCap and you have not gotten any more, and you're just sitting on it and not doing anything with it, versus like, is that a different behavior than the person who is just going out and like requesting and trying to just accumulate DataCap without doing anything? Those are two different behaviors as well.
There's also the risk of like now wanting to sell an address, right? This has been a long-term, like DataCap is lucrative. There was at points like markets for like DataCap where people were paying people to make deals with them for DataCap. Yeah. Why create a risk where like, oh, got 100 terabytes of DataCap, decided not to use it, just going to sit on in a year and wait for somebody to offer me cash for it. Like, that's not a good setup for the integrity of the system. So
do we interact at all with the sort of crypto economic team at Protocol Labs on questions like this? Because I don't know the ramifications, but I'm sitting there going, well, another issue is sort of the effectively inflationary process of just constantly handing out DataCap, and I'm curious as to, I wasn't around when the Filecoin Plus system was sort of built out, and I wonder if there's some aspect to this that we're not considering that the crypto economic people would spot.
Good question. I think that's a valid point. It's probably worth reflagging. I would also expect that engaged crypto economic folks should be looking at FIP discussions, because they're the most important thing in the network. But I will reflag it too, just in case, to a couple of folks. That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, maybe just sitting down and having like even a sort of public discussion where we run through these things, because I think that might also be useful for the other discussion, because I mean, I haven't read it. Thank you for drawing it to attention. But on FIP 203, you know, the main compelling argument for me for this whole process is crypto economics. So I think that it would help to draw out both how things like this might affect that side of things, and also kind of reaffirm that that's the reason why this exists.
Fair enough. I think we should continue that. I did want to just say though, just sorry to keep gating you on this, Galen. It would be good to see folks here, like, at least take this as food for thought on, like, one, whether or not you do have a strong opinion, whether or not this should happen, because you should share that immediately in GitHub. But also secondly, like, on this implementation standpoint, which is like, what do we actually need for it to be considered like fair, to be like, hey, like this client, it's the other FIP. Just, yeah, you're gonna get it. Awesome, thank you. What is it actually, like, what do we need as a community to feel safe about a decision like this? Is the bar, like, how high does the bar need to be? And so out of these, like, I think it's important to also preserve the fact that if we do the inactivity thing, then that's probably something we want to automate. So we should ensure that there's some aspect of like multi-sig thing happening here, where like it can take, maybe like takes in like signatures from like multiple multi-sigs or something. We have the opportunity to experiment here and create also a new kind of construct for signing that could be beneficial for us down the line in Filecoin Plus overall. And so I really like the idea of like combining like notary signatures and the root key holder thing, because that's something we haven't done before and could be interesting and beneficial, where it's like, not only is this like a higher bar where it's like 2 or more notaries that have to sign this, but then also they have to ensure that it's documented and auditable in a way that somebody who's an unbiased observer who's not plugged into the network, right? These are like security folks at like the highly influential organizations can look at that data and say, yeah, this seems reasonable. All of this makes sense. There's an audit trace here that I can follow. And like, here's a thumbs up kind of a thing. And so my opinion would be that let's do some combination of notaries plus root key holders. I don't know what those numbers are. I see Charles is saying 1 notary plus 2 root key holders. And then Charles, then my question to you would be, does that notary have to be the one that gave the data cap to the client, or can it be any notary? Because then I would say that you probably want the same one to keep the preservation on the due diligence. And then there's also learnings from that experience. But then there's repercussions on what if that person is no longer a notary. So I think we have to do a little bit more thinking on this. So I'll continue to engage on GitHub and Slack in the next couple of weeks. But I would love that in the following governance call to this, we have a strong opinion that we can go back to the implementation team with and say, hey, here's our initial hypothesis for what we should do. That way it allows us to get into the next big network upgrade, which will come in like the Feb timeframe, and we can that will be timed well with all of our other like end of Q1 goals, and so then we can iterate from there together. That's my thinking. I'm happy to be disagreed with and engage on this further.
Yeah. Okay, we do have to move on. So K-Ray is here with some community updates. K-Ray, you want to unmute and jump in on this one?
Yeah, unmuted. Galen, thank you for that. I want to bring the first bit of information to light is on January 4th, there will not be a call. So you're going to see this posted in the repo. You'll see this posted in Slack, but you hear it first. January 4th, there won't be a call. The next week, however, we will resume. So on January 11th, that'll be the first call of 2022. Now, the other thing that bring to light is how are we getting this information out of you and collecting this signal? So those of you who are on the call, you could listen, you might thumbs up with emojis, you might unmute and kind of weigh in. But sometimes we want to look at like, what other ways can we get that feedback? How are we enabling you to participate in the community? So the next couple of days or weeks, you'll see a feedback survey come from me. And I might ask for time to get one-on-one with you just to kind of chat, get to know you, how you communicate, what you're looking for in the program. What are your thoughts that might not always be easy to post to a GitHub repo, maybe easy to bring up in a call like this. So it's just a friendly heads up. I'll be reaching out to you in the coming days and weeks just to kind of get that feel for what we can do and get your feedback on some of these questions we're asking. The last is just to keep you updated. We're submitting the RFP for the leaderboard for the notaries. So in the coming weeks, you'll see this come through. We'll keep you updated as this progress unfolds. but we hope to solicit bids with this in the coming days and weeks, and we hope to have that leaderboard up in early 2021. So if you took nothing from this raspy cold throat voice right now, it's that you'll be seeing that January 4th time disappear from your calendar and a brand new series start up on January 11th, along with some new invites to start talking about one-on-one what you like and what you want from this program. Thanks. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, K-Ray. Fantastic. There were some other notary governance discussions that are not in the form of FIPS that we needed to talk through. We have 10 minutes, so we're going to try and do these quick. Number 319, DataCap distribution expectations across multiple storage providers. We've gotten two examples of this, both large data set number 36 and large data set 79. So that's 79 is Shinshu and 36 is Ecology Limited. In both of those, in their application, they stated with their allocation plan how they would be distributing deals to a broader range of storage providers. However, they have now received some number of allocations and have not been following that allocation plan. When asked about this, and you can go kind of read their our questions and their responses, and I'm sort of speaking for them and like summarizing this, so I encourage you to go read it yourself as well. One of the claims that they make is that they have attempted to reach out to more storage providers to make deals, but have not been successful. And that is why their deal making behavior is the way that it is. So we are in a place where we need to decide, are we still comfortable awarding more DataCap to these LDNs that are not operating on the terms of their initial application, with the hope being that if we give them more DataCap, they will be better able to make more distributed deals? Or is this the kind of thing that we want to pause them? You know, where do we as a community want to move forward specifically with these two, but then broadly with large data sets that kind of don't follow something they put in their application? So I want to stop here and let's see if there's like 2 or 3 minutes of questions or conversations around this issue.
Hi, Galen and all the governance members. I'm Tim from Ecology Limited. So I'm a system engineer there and participate all the steps onboarding Filecoin network. Do I have several minutes to describe all the difficulties or the situations I have been met during the past several months? Okay, if time allowed. Okay, thank you. So we have been struggling trying to onboarding our data onto the Filecoin network. At the very beginning, before we start this process, we look at the Filecoin storage provider miner list. It's like more than 3,000 miners are there, sitting there. So we think we find 30 out of them could be easy, but we were wrong. And at the very beginning, we tried the online storage deal method, which seems reasonable to our engineering team because everything would be automatic. We just publish some storage deals and everything would be automatic. But unfortunately, unless we divided our data block down to the size of around 128 megabytes, that's small size. And even if with that small size data blocks, we cannot get a stable result. A lot of miners just replied they doesn't accept storage deals. And some of them bounced back some error message, told us that we need to contact some offline email or Slack channel to be continued. And even if some miner accept the deal automatically, the state would be trapped into the transferring stage forever. Our company rely on a large amount of online trading data from the exchange, all kinds of exchange platforms every day. We collect hundreds of terabytes of data, raw data into our system, and our data engineer would use those data to train our model. So we most of them, we use the recent data within 1 year, but for the code data, we would need them like every quarterly basis when we try to revise our model, and we will bring back the old data. So when, at that time, we think the Filecoin provide us a very good way to store the code data. But then we realized that the large amount of data, like around 100 terabytes a day, bring us a big obstacle to onboarding our data into Filecoin network. So when we find difficulties in the online deal mode, we realized that we have to contact the miner one by one offline, because we need to make sure the miner can provide high quality and good enough speed to seal our data according to our speed, according to the data we generate every day. So we found a couple of miners first from North America, because our data located in United States. So we think North America will be a good start. Then we found that even if we find a couple of miners who are willing to collaborate with us, we find that we have to engage two technical teams from two companies deeply to get the whole process done. So it took us around 2 weeks for both teams to engage with each other deeply, for us to transfer the data to their side, and then they seal the data for us, and finally we get it done. After we started to looking for more miners which can provide offline mode data storage for us. We found some more miners from China, but then we found that the data transfer speed is so slow, so it took forever for we to push like 10 terabytes to their side. So eventually it led to the situation that we only have 3 miners serving us, and the data cap is also very imbalanced because North America ones grab almost all of the data, majority part of the data, and the China miners, they only have a small portion, like 30%. But still, we are trying to look for more miners which can support us. And again, because we generate so many data per day, when we're looking for miners who can support us, we need to check very detailedly to make sure they can really seal that many data for us per day. So we also find out that some miners claim they can seal the data like 100 terabytes a day, but when it comes to the storage deal, we're trying to do some testing. They find out that the speed dropped dramatically. I don't know what's behind the theory. So just the majority part of the miners cannot satisfy our speed or quality requirements, but we're still trying to reach out more. The only issue here is that we find the whole process kind of painful for our engineering team. We don't know the quality of the 3,000 miners, so we have to do our own data analysis. We try to grab data from the network, try to analyze how many data they hosted, and trying to give a quality score from our own side. But it's we don't understand the protocol pretty well, so it's quite superficial and quite low efficiency. So if the community can support us by giving the miners some kind of quality score or kind of star, then we can choose from a smaller list, high quality miners. Then we contact with them, trying to find the really good ones for us. That'll be much better, much helpful to us. So even today, we are still struggling, trying to find more high quality miners working together and willing to work together with us to hold our data. But then we found out the DataCap is used up. So here I am trying to explain everything to you guys. So we really want to, we have been in the crypto industry for a while. We really want to satisfy our storage requirement within the crypto world. But yeah, we have been working on this for quite some time, like the past almost 2 months. And we are looking forward to the final decision from the community. If we can get the DataCap and then we can move on, or we should find out some other manners for our data. So thank you all for the time. And hopefully this can give you guys another point of view from the client side. We really have a large amount of data and need the storage, but we suffering. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Sorry to cut you off. We are at time here, but we really appreciate you coming to this call and sharing all of that. I think that this gives us a lot of really good insights that, you know, as you explained, like we don't always have the whole picture. So I think, you know, Deep and I both have some thoughts. Maybe we could get some back and forth going in the public Filecoin Slack. And then we can also kind of make some comments back and forth in the GitHub issue. But as we are at time and we're losing some of the notaries, maybe we could just see in that issue, we could get with some comments from some other notaries to see about what we want to do to move forward. I do want to encourage other people, so go check out these discussion topics, which will link to those different issues, and you can see where they're at and put some more information in. The other one came from Andrew Hill around reducing constraints on requesting additional DataCap. Check that one out. I think that one's a little less juicy and more around sort of some documentation and some things that need to get corrected around documentation. And then there's potentially a new discussion, which we definitely don't have time for, around different types of addresses. But we may just have to talk about that in 2 weeks. So as we are at time, want to thank everyone. Check out the open FIPS, check out the open discussion topics, check out open client issues and large data set issues, and please comment there. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Great. Happy 4 p.m. Pacific time, everybody. Welcome, Notary Governance call for the 23rd. We're going to just go ahead and jump in. Action-packed agenda. Potentially going to run through these top 2 sections a little bit faster on this call because we didn't quite have as much time to discuss some open issues as we wanted to earlier when we did this. So be prepared for some faster metric updates. Pulling some stats from our interplanetary dashboard, we're seeing some happy average times of 2 days and 1 day, 3 hours to allocation in the past 30 days. So that's spectacular. A lot of that is still taking into account our automations. So our average time for notaries is still at 11 days. So hoping to get that number a little bit lower. And also we're still working on getting some statistics on LDNs. So the 2 of our teams work with them on having endpoints and status changes being tracked so that we can then start reporting on some of the time, time to root key holder action, time to sort of first allocation, time to, second signature, that sort of thing. looking at our DataCap funnel, just a really high level, the amount allocated to clients from those direct notaries, we're seeing it at about 2.25 petabyte, which is about 30% of the DataCap that has been given to the notaries, and then comparing that to LDNs already at 3.8 petabytes to clients from those LDNs. An interesting thing to kind of call out, we're seeing like a fascinating close similarity in the percentage as the funnel decreases from client to deal storage provider. So for LDNs, that's at 1.6 PEBs, which is about 40%, and very similar for direct client behavior as well, 985 TB, again, about 42% drop from what has been given to them by the notaries to what they've sealed in deals. So could be some interesting behavior patterns there that we may want to sort of investigate and dig into. Speaking of those notaries, some direct notary activity stats. We've got about 27 open issues as of yesterday, which looks to about 8 in the last week being new. Number dropped a little bit. 253 that are granted in our client onboarding repo. That number may not perfectly line up with all of the actual client applications that have been granted. Sometimes those get deleted, but that's how many there. And we're seeing about 15 in the past 7 days. 63% of those applications are getting a first response. That's been pretty consistent. And seeing about 24 out of the 79 clients that put in an application are getting DataCap per month. So not bad. We'll talk a little bit later on about some of the leaderboard things we've mentioned before around better ways to display some of these stats in a live web surface. So from there, going to pass it to Deep to sort of quickly talk through some of our Q1 goal updates.
Kind of crazy that we're talking about 2022 already. I feel like this year is absolutely flown by. Nice to see all of you for the second governance call today. Just talking through just the same parameters that you're used to hearing from me on for the last couple of weeks now. Well, several weeks, the last couple of governance calls now. The first of which is volume, where we want DataCap to be abundant and available to all clients that are worthy of receiving it. Cool stats to update here is that when tracking through LDN applications that have either been granted in the past or are currently in the state of granted, and adding up all the total amount of DataCap that was allocated for them, that number is now at 98.5 petabytes. So that includes, of course, the stuff that went through like the first LDN process, which was maybe in I think high 20s or low 30s, if I recall correctly, and then net about 60 additional. That's out of the 100 that we earmarked for this program. So we should also talk about the continuation of this and if we think it's good or not good and how we want to adjust it. But perhaps we can keep that for the next call or for the discussion section of this. But TLDR is between what's been given to the notaries and what's actually started to be granted to clients. As of this week, that number has crossed 100 petabytes, and that is freaking awesome. Congratulations. 6 months ago, that number was at 2 petabytes, 3 petabytes. So this is a big achievement in terms of whether or not we feel like we're at least getting to the point that we're comfortable allocating DataCap at a much larger scale and supporting clients that are bringing on much larger use cases. Of course, there's a lot of work to be done still, not only in terms of getting this number substantively further up, but also ensuring that we're doing it in a way that is safe. It's being tracked. The clients are empowered to actually use that DataCap well. So right now, we passed another milestone a couple of weeks ago where 5 petabytes of DataCap had actually made it into the actual addresses of clients, which is also a great milestone considering 3 months ago we were less than 1 petabyte, and so we're more than 5x that in the last quarter. But the utilization of that DataCap is still hovering around 40%, which means that clients are not able to action 60% or so of the DataCap that they're receiving today. And that number has been pretty consistent. It's been between 30 and 40% over the last 4 months, 5 months. And so while this goal specifically tracks the volume and the availability of DataCap and ensuring that it's there for the people that need it, there's also there's always that little asterisk that keep in the back of your minds, ultimately, it all comes down to supporting clients and ensuring that they have a good experience and are able to leverage this as a tool to be set up for success on the Filecoin network. Second up, my favorite metric, TTD, where we track the time to DataCap. This is kind of steady state from the last call, where it still takes about 11 days on average to get DataCap when there's a notary involved in the loop, or if this average includes people that go to the automated verifier as well. And then for things that go LDN, like there are applications that have gone through in like 3 days, but at the tail end of that, we're still looking at like 3-4 weeks for open applications. There's two sort of thinking things that I want to call out here for this. The first, which I did call out this morning, the second I failed to, but the first one was basically that like over the last few calls, we have generally decided to support increasing automated verification to have a much higher scale of DataCap being granted. So right now, the only automated verifier is verify.glyph.io, and that grants 32 GB of DataCap. I had a discussion going in the past where we're like, what would it take to support up to 1 terabyte? And everybody here seemed to be pretty supportive of it over the last 2 or 3 governance calls. And so we'll be pushing that towards implementation. Let's see if verify.glyph.io is interested in doing that, or if we need to put out like an RFP. But I do think that getting to that magnitude will also push us a little bit in terms of structuring the notary role a little bit and evolving it a little bit to like fit those needs and figuring out like how we want to serve the community that way. If we really believe that like GitHub-based KYC is still the right thing for an automated verifier, et cetera. So please, chime in on that discussion if you have opinions. The second thing that I wanted to call out here was around the fact that today when we track TTD, we're actually doing it for successful applications only, really. But there's an aspect of this where if a client is not going to get DataCap, like them knowing sooner is also an important and good thing. But also if a client is getting DataCap, then like engaging with them in a way that sets them up for success at the start is better, where we can get them more data on what they need to provide to us more upfront. So today when a client goes through the onboarding flow, they basically just end up posting like basic information, right? Like what website they're coming from, how much DataCap they need, what their name is, etc. But I think it would be excellent for us to start thinking about when we can actually get to a stage where there's more consistency across due diligence processes. This is also highlighted by a FIP that we'll talk about later in this call, but sort of leveraging all of your individual expertises to build a much more robust due diligence process. Especially because we've also found that in some cases, like the due diligence of an individual notary, which contributes to this 11-day number, is sometimes even more robust than what we're doing for some of the clients applying for LDNs. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because the amount of effort going into do KYC should be correlated with the DataCap that a client is getting. And so just some ideas, prompts for thinking. I would love to hear thoughts at the latter end of this call. Let's move on to the next slide. This slide has an exciting update, which is that in the last week, we had 2 new dashboards shared with us. And as far as I'm aware, there actually might be a third one that's being developed. So the first of which is pluskit.io. Very visually pleasing dashboard that talks to the DataCap funnel, has interesting stats. They've renamed, I don't know if this is renaming actually, but they have this metric on efficiency, which I think is probably similar to TTD. But it would be nice to also see the methodology for how they're calculating that, but not sure. If any one of you in this call knows, please do share. If not, putting the ask out into the world. If you're watching this recording and you built this, please get in touch with us. Come present it at the next governance call. We'd love to hear from you. Engage with us on Slack and tell us how to give you some feedback, because it'd be awesome to develop this further. And then in a similar vein, the Athena Pool folks also released a DataCap statistics tab on their Athena Explorer. So at the top, you can now see there's a DataCap statistics. And this is also similar in terms of tracking like the DataCap funnel and DataCap flow. Great to see more sources of this data, because it's super important to preserve like the integrity and the decentralized nature of decision making, both immediate term but also longer term for Filecoin Plus as we move closer and closer towards automating a lot of this functionality. Having multiple opinions in the room and individual opinions in the room on what the state of truth is will matter, because that's how we will build a converged state of truth. And so between these two, Fplus.info, which was built by Laura and the excellent FileDrive team, and then the Filecoin Plus dashboard that Gail and I are partnering with right now, we've got 4 solid foundations to build off of and improve our understanding of the state of the program. there's a thought in the morning as well on like maybe we want to start having like a dashboards people sync for Filecoin Plus, like maybe once a month or maybe even more infrequently required, but some kind of sync on either at the very least establishing standards on what it takes to be like a dashboard for Filecoin Plus, like for example, like publish your methodology and how you calculate certain statistics, share your data via an API so that other people can also like use that in automation, things like that. And or like let's just sync up and talk about like discrepancies that we're seeing in the data to make sure that some of the stuff we're on the same page, or maybe we're at least aligning on how we define certain terminology, so that it's easier to interpret and compare data across inputs. The following two focus areas largely unchanged so far. Client onboarding UX, that's a huge focus area for us. Always open to discussing and improving how we can do that. And then generally Filecoin Plus governance, for which K-Ray has an update later in this call, so I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I'm going to hand it back to Ldn to take it away.
All right, thank you. So we have a couple of open FIPS to discuss. It is our community, FIPS normally happen and impact sort of the broader community, and it's interesting that right now there are two that are really specifically geared towards Filecoin Plus. So just a caveat here, I am not the author of either of these FIPS, but we do actually have one of the authors here on this call. So maybe we will put them on blast here in a second. But before we do, going in chronological order, FIP 203 to remove the Fplus notary process. So there's been a few conversations and comments back and forth. This one was opened 20 days ago. I encourage you to go read through and weigh in. Some interesting ideas at kind of a very high level. An argument that is being made is that the notary process is creating centralization, and there's kind of an argument to be made for getting rid of notaries and just giving anyone any amount of data cap that they want. And so some things that have sort of come out of this is, what does it look like to sort of evolve and change both the notary role as well as the notary election process, and how does this kind of map to the overall goals of the Filecoin Plus program? So before I move on to the next FIP, would love if people on this call have either some questions or strong opinions about this, so that we can just capture those here. Again, this is not my proposal, but happy to hear them. So we'll just pause for a few seconds, see if there are any hands or questions.
I'm raising my hand because I have strong opinions on this one, but I have voiced my opinions already in the FIP discussion, and I'm going to continue doing that. I do think that there are some useful takeaways here, though, and a lot of the feedback is good, even though I don't necessarily agree with the intended changes that are being proposed. I think that the feedback is valid, and also feedback, as the discussion has continued to evolve and the feedback has become more crisp in terms of like problem areas that we have, I think a lot of it is actually in alignment in the discussions that we've been having as a community over the last 6 to 8 weeks. I wasn't particularly surprised by a lot of the actual, this makes a lot of sense, we should think about it kind of a thing, at least for me. I do think there's some really interesting prompts to thinking. So as many of you here have been invested in the development of this program for a year now, year plus, I do think it is worth your while to read through this thread though, and see if you have any thoughts, because I think there's some really cool ideas being shared, especially just generally around more like distributed and decentralized governance, and coming up with mechanisms where like participation in the program is more like fairly evaluated, or like fairly and like set up for success, in that like maybe we need to do a better job with how like notary elections get influenced. Like, how does the community play a role in how notary elections actually happen? Or do notaries need to like stake something to feel like they can participate in a distributed fashion, and then that becomes open to a lot more people as opposed to just a subset of people? There's also questions around like process things, like how should we do dispute and audit? How should we verify private data sets? And these things, to be honest, like in these calls, we have talked literally about these exact topics, and we've all had ideas and we've talked through examples of how people are doing them. So it's a nice reminder that sort of, one, I'm glad that we're thinking about a lot of the right stuff together and we're making progress in hopefully some good directions. but then also always good to have a reminder to be more creative and think about ways in which the system can be designed more effectively. Jennifer, you have a hand. What's up?
Yeah, I just quickly skimming through this fifth discussion. Definitely feel like it's very interesting. So I feel like my personal take on this is like it's hard for us to have like immediate action to actually like do whatever this CS proposed. Develop new decentralized algorithm and for the notary process. I definitely feel like since we're getting easier next year when we have FVM like landing in the network, with smart contract, and also being able to compute or like easily compute like on the data that is stored via like verified deal or like those kinds, or like next year if we have the retrieval market, we have the indexer and have like toolings built around like retrieving the data that actually stored to verify the process. Like all those tools will be making this thing like easier. I just don't see as of today how we can move forward and have like a very useful changes to the program, like to the notary process. But I definitely feel like we should keep this discussion open. And then whenever we have a new technology introduced in the Filecoin network, we should like keep brainstorming the ideas here.
Yeah, I think at a high level, if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like you don't fundamentally like disagree with some of the things that are raised here. It's just that the technical solutions to be able to implement some of these changes don't currently exist and couldn't exist, in a month. And so keeping this open as a place to like have this conversation, but also knowing that the technical lift to do this is something that we're still working on.
Exactly. And another thing I was just thinking of is like this FIP maybe like works really well with the other FIP like that was opened a long time ago. It's like being able to do a regular deal first and then upgrade those to verified deals and getting a storage for other extra power. So if we do that, we can maybe offloading some of the notary process as well. But also that FIP was like sort of controversial, but also like because on the protocol level or the tooling level, we don't have the technology, like, we can't support it easily. That's why it's like, on pause right now. But I feel like these two can link pretty well in the future. And I would love to see more discussion on that.
Awesome, thank you. And while we have you, why don't we think about talking through this FIP 204 around DataCap Management, and kind of we've talked about this one previously on another call, and I think that kind of the two specific proposals that are being made really are around technical implementation of like how would we transfer DataCap from a client address to a client address, and then how would we remove DataCap from a client address and or remove a client from the verified registry. I think that before I turn it over to Jennifer, one of the things that we've sort of landed on as a community in a couple of different calls and conversations is that we don't really understand a valid use case right now for transferring DataCap from a client to another client compared to like the parameters of the program and sort of this idea that DataCap is readily abundant and available. And so as it stands, we're typically more in favor of splitting this out into two different proposals. And we have a stronger opinion around supporting this removing DataCap from a verified client. And sort of the question that we have for the notaries on the call is kind of like, how would we tactically want to support doing that? Like, what would the actual system rules be? And these are just some ideas that Deep and I came up with. These are by no means meant to be an exhaustive list or even a prescriptive list. But so some things for the notaries to think through right now is kind of like, what would it look like for it to be some subset of notaries or notaries and root key holders, and how would that work? But first, I'm going to like pass it to Jennifer to sort of talk through this fit, where, some history about it, some where we are right now, that sort of thing. Take it away.
Thank you. But yeah, so like when I first started, when I first had this thought, basically I was thinking like there are more and more, data broker in the network. We have S-Tray, we have a Matrix, we have Base, all those, and a lot of them started to get like large data cap allocation, which I think is great. But I haven't that's on me, but I haven't keep up with the whole Filecoin program that much these days as well. So I was a little bit concerned that, data broker, sometimes they will run out of data cap, and I really don't want them to lose that momentum and getting real data onboarded into the network. And I also know there are a lot of existing clients that already got data cap. They are actually using the data broker service. So I was like, if they already have the data cap, why do they have to use the data broker data cap? Maybe they can just transfer their own data cap to the data broker instead. So, the data brokers can have more data cap on that. That's why I created the main reason I created transfer data cap proposal. But I browsed through the thread and totally understand the concerns that people have been bringing. We don't want to have a data cap market and so on and so forth. And I also learned that we have made progress in the large data cap application in general, and we will be ensuring that the good data brokers will get the data cap as they need. So I definitely agree that we can put a pin on transfer data cap and don't have to worry about that too much right now. Like Galen said, we do want to push for revoke data cap from the clients for multiple reasons. Can we go back to your slide maybe? So I feel like the community has a good understanding on why we need that, for to ensure good behavior of the verified client, to make sure the data cap are actually put in use in the network, all those reasons. So I don't think it's controversial for us to implement that in protocol or not. But based on the questions here, what we can do is basically we can do anything. So from an actor perspective, we can say we can have multiple message. For example, someone can propose a revoke data cap message, and then we can have 2 or more notaries or one rookie holders to approve that message before we actually do the action. That's one option. The other thing we can do is it's gonna be one message. However, a couple of notary, we will be collecting signatures from multiple notaries or rookie holders, then have that sent to the network as in one message. That's all possible. So it comes down to a governance problem for the Filecoin Plus. It's if this is a trust program, who can make the decision how many signature we need, as long as the Filecoin Plus community can reach consensus? I think on protocol level, core dev should be able to implement in the way you guys wanted. Basically,
You hear it here, folks. The core dev team can build us anything we want. It's just up to us to ask for it. That's what I heard Jennifer say.
Anything we want. So
anything. Core dev team can make anything. Anything is possible.
What are you guys trying to get me through? But yeah, we do have an amazing, talented, engineering team. So I'm comfortable to say that. Again, you have to reach consensus first. But I do see one thing missing here. Yes, I do want to talk about expiration on data cap a little bit more. So I don't know how the Filecoin Plus community is feeling about all those stale data cap that is not used in the network right now. Is that something we want to do in the future?
Yeah, so why don't we pause there and just see. We have some notaries on the call. Feel free, if you have strong opinions or if you have clarifying questions, drop them in the chat or raise your hand. So let's just pause for a second and let people digest.
I just want to say that I think this is a pretty interesting opportunity for us to also test root key holder plus notary interaction for like signing something. It's like kind of unprecedented for us. We haven't done this before, but it could be cool in that one, I think it's really important to have notaries agree on this because ultimately the decision is coming from them. But the pulling in of the root key holder is compelling from the perspective of preserving a clear like audit trail where somebody who isn't part of the community actively can still understand the rationale, follow the decision, and the decision gets recorded, with multiple signatures coming in from different stakeholder groups. And so personally, like I would put this as a plug as, hey, like even if we do this just to like experiment with it and then have this implementation done, it creates like interesting combinations of things that we can also do in the future. And it also ensures that like today root key holders sort of show up and just batch sign in notaries. This might give them something interesting to do as well in addition to that. But I do think it's a pretty cool way to integrate like multiple sort of stakeholders. So I would definitely propose like, maybe the second one where it's like two notaries where one of them is the one that originally gave the data cap to the client and maybe one of the root key holder entities or something like that.
Actually, you bring up like a very good point. Like from the thing you say is like bulk transaction. So right now, like I'm pretty sure like for allocate like DataCap, we can like one message can only handle one allocation, or like one grant. That is something we can fix as well. We can say like in one message, you can actually grant DataCap to multiple clients, and in one message, Rookie can verify, multiple notaries. That is something like worse in like FIP. That's a pretty easy, I would say, protocol change like in Actor we make. And if you want that in the next, network upgrade, we should get the process going, and then we should do the same for, revoke DataCap. I think that can solve a lot of like issues with like, manual process notary and root key holder needs to be done. So look at Deep. Oh my God, thinking like the best engineer we have.
No, I think it's actually that does remind me of it. I did flag this in the morning call, so I should do it now as well, which is I think getting this implemented for the next network upgrade in Feb versus like waiting another 2-3 months after that is super compelling for us. Like we're tracking towards all of this stuff for Q1. It's like our most aggressive period of change that we've had in the system, starting from like August, September till Q1. And I think that this is like yet another really cool thing that we'll get to integrate as part of our like process safety, our system safety side of things, especially as we expand the scope of the program substantively. And so I'm very much in the favor of like, let's talk more now. Let's talk more at the next governance call, and then at least, and then at that stage, go back to the implementation team with a proposal that says, hey, like let's try this first, kind of a thing. Even if it's for us to change later, at least we'll have something to start out with. And so erring on the side of like having something and then maybe being more conservative is like my personal bias here, but I would love to hear what other notaries think, because I know we have a few pretty vocal notaries in the call right now. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, Deep. It's Meg. How are you?
Hi, Meg. How's it going? Good to hear your voice. Hope things are well down under.
Yeah, I've been a bit absent, but I'll explain that offline afterwards. Listen, I'm sort of scanning these now, and I think there's lots of questions about what happens and how might it impact storage providers and clients. And you might remember me a while ago saying how it would be useful. And I know that, Galen, you did a map a while ago, but it was more process and it was on our side. But what if we flipped it and we started to put the lens or the focus on the client journey, and we understand beginning to end what their process is? And it's like there's a formula for this. It's from like acquire to maintain to retire the client, right? So it's not that hard. We can just apply a formula, have a look at what they need, what happens when they fall out of the system, when they're not using, and it might help us solve some of the underutilization parts as well, like how do we identify them? So I'm volunteering to do it. I can sit down with yourself and Galen to start to do the first version. We can test it back with a few other notaries that want to be involved. but when you're making decisions like these and these issues are coming up, some of the things are, well, how would it work? But if we could visualize it, maybe that might make things easier.
Actually, we had Tim from Ecology Limited dial into the call this morning. He ran into the very interesting challenge of basically getting to commit too many of his deals to only 2 storage providers because nobody else wanted to take his deals initially. And then getting wrecked basically by the fact that we have guardrails in place that say you can't overcommit deals to like less than like 3 or 5 storage providers, because their original goal was to have like 30 storage providers. And so their like DataCap tranche was not shipped. The second one was not like sent out because it's like, hey, like you used 2 storage providers when you said you'd use 30. And so he came to the call to like talk through like his pain points on like how do you do data transfer for miners in general, like how do you find storage providers that can reliably make deals at the magnitude that they're looking for, and do it fast enough in a way that it doesn't get flagged as like a foul compared to like the expectations set by the client when receiving DataCap. And so I think like it's like I guess I'm coming from the bias from the conversation we had this morning, but what you're saying sounds very compelling, where we don't have the equivalent level of fidelity of understanding what it feels like to be a client compared to what it feels like to be in the process as a client or to be a notary. And so I think outlining that journey definitely is a good use of time. I think getting it done by a client would also be ideal in a way where it's like a either work extremely closely with some vocal clients or just request them to like write some of the thoughts that they've shared. Like even Tim, if you were to bullet out some of the things that he shared this morning, I think would be a really good step in this direction. But yeah, this is something you're excited about, Meg. Like I don't see any reason why anybody would block.
I know how to do it. Like, and it's not actually not rocket science. Like we pull it together what we think it is, and then we do go and test it with clients to see if that is in fact the journey. And then along the way, we pick up where there's friction and where there's opportunities, and that's how we improve the process. Then it becomes a living thing, right? So, and as guardrails and rules and automation happen, so does the journey. That changes as well. And then it might make it simpler for anyone that's catching up on the changes, because we're all not in one place at one time, and so therefore it's hard to follow sometimes. It's a suggestion. I think about it. I'll ping you guys offline a little bit more about it. If you want to do something with it, I'm volunteering to set it up. I'll work out with you guys who we would need to help make it happen.
That's fun. Any other notaries have thoughts on implementation side for this? Like what sounds like a compelling requirement, or what sounds like a compelling audit trace to say, yes, like we as a community decided we should revoke verified client status or like remove DataCap from a client, and then who needs to be liable for that ending up on the chain?
I personally feel like have like multiple notaries should be good enough, because like one rookie holder has like, granted DataCap to the notaries. Basically, they trust the notaries to like handle, to monitor and handling the whole DataCap allocation across the network. So I don't think we have to have some like rookie holder there, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think there was similar opinion this morning too, where it was like rookie holders may not need to be involved in this. I think the only benefit of that is basically one, getting to test that as a combination for future like more automation based decisions and decision making as we move towards that. And I think the only other reason would be like to have like pure like execution based audit drilling, where like rookie holders are not plugged into the process. They don't really know what each individual client is doing. And so to fire off a request to rookie holder, you typically, we like, at least when Galen and I do it, for example, when we're adding a new notary, it's like you have the whole application, you have like the reasoning, the rubric. And so that way somebody has zero context can still page in and say, yes, this makes sense. We should execute on this. We have all the data we need to execute on this. Because their role is not necessary to have an opinion, but rather to get enough data to say we can execute on this. And so it ends up being like a slight gatekeep in the quality of the audit trailing that we do. And so I think that could be valuable, but may not be a requirement.
Right. I would echo Dee's point on that. To me, I think as I think about these options, I think the one that is most compelling is 2 notaries and 1 root key holder, for the reasons that he mentioned of like being able to test that, but also from the sense that if I think about like what is the unhappy path that this could go down, where it could, like, how could this become a threat to the program and the network, right? Like, what if we don't require a root key holder and it's 2 notaries? What does it look like for suddenly 2 notaries to go rogue, revoke all of the DataCap from a ton of large data set clients, shut down their operations, even if it's just for a day until, you know, the notary, like other notaries jump in and realize what's going on? Like, what are the stop gaps on sort of this process going off the rails? And I think one of the interesting things about thinking about how the root key holders can do that is Deep's point, which are, these are people that are less available, less plugged in, and less kind of have maybe a different set of stakes in the program compared to the notaries and what their interests in the program overall would be. And so by having a root key holder in the loop, it sort of, as he's saying, forces more of that justification audit trail that says, like, the 2 notaries need to come with a clear proof, and then the root key holder can be like, yes, this passes like my bar of should we revoke. Jenny, you got another point, question, clarifying?
Oh, I think what you said, like your concern is like very real. I do want to point out, like maybe create another FIP. We're literally changing Filecoin Plus to Fitbit, but like another FIP can be like maybe root key holder. I don't think it exists today. It's like be able to remove like a membership for a notary. It's like if those notary did go vote like for no reasons, like are actually harm the network, we should just like take them out of like the notary table, right?
Right. That does exist, yeah.
Oh yeah, that does exist already. Okay.
The remove verifier is a command,
yep.
Jen.
Yep. There's not right now a clear, like, if this happens or this or this. There's not necessarily a clear parameter. However, there is a technical tool where a root key holder can remove a notary, which we have also used for cleaning up LDNs, where we created an LDN multisig, which functions as a notary. And in an effort to roll those to the new process, we deprecate that notary. So the technical tooling is there for root key holders. So basically, like, we built a tool that lets a root key holder make a notary. We built tools that let notaries empower clients. Now we're talking about what does it look like to go backwards, right? So we've got a tool where a notary can revoke, or a root key holder can revoke a notary. So then what is the tool that allows notaries to revoke clients? And so it's just like, it's how do we flow forwards and backwards?
Yeah, I'm aware like that, you know, a root key holder that can set like a DataCap balance of like notary to be like 0. But like, can you create a action item like for me to actually check when a notary's DataCap balance is 0, yet he or she is actually removed from the notary? Like,
because that's how we propose it to them.
Yeah, because I should double check that, because like if we're gonna do this like multi-signature thing like later, we have to make sure that people that doesn't have any, you know, okay, we already have it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, pretty sure that exists, Jen. Actually, just so you're aware, we should double check, and so I will ping you to double check this. But today, the proposal mechanism to the root key holders that we draft is like set this balance to 0, and that gets interpreted as remove verifier, set balance to 0. And so we should double check like what happens, but yeah, because I don't think we've seen notaries that stay on the registry, the verifier registry, when their balance is 0, because the same thing should happen to clients as well, where they're removed from the registry when their balance is 0. But we can go double check.
Yeah, it does exist. you guys know the actor works better than me, which is perfect. Yeah, another option like to add to this like combination list, because sounds like you guys want to keep things flexible and also like want to play with like notary rookie holder like responsibility, like sharing experience. And here, another option we can do is you say, in total, we need like 3 signature. It can be a combination of X amount of like any amount of like notaries or any amount of like rookie holder. That is something we can do on protocol level too. So just
yeah, one of the things that we've sort of brought up a few times that would be really interesting is a multi-sig of multi-sigs, and kind of how would that, which we're sort of running out of time to spend a lot of time on this idea, but like what does it look like to basically say, like, if we create a multi-sig and there are, for example, 2 people from one organization on that multi-sig, how do we say only 1 person from the Filecoin Foundation is necessary, but we need 2 signatures overall, right? And so it could be either of these 5 people at Filecoin, but only 1. Right, and then we need someone else from an outside organization as well. And so that starts to become an interesting thing. It's like, if we say the rule is you need 2 notaries, any 2 notaries, and 1 root key holder out of any of this list of root key holders, you know, how do we set the threshold of the message is 3, but it's 2 from column A and 1 from column B, and also bring their passport and their COVID vaccine card with them. But anyway, it sounds like Ginny has already solved this and she knows how to do it. I do want to move on. I think that we have K-Ray here to talk about some fun holiday information and upcoming things for the community. K-Ray.
Yeah, thanks, Galen. New voice, new topic. Here's what I'll hit you with first. If you see on the slide, holiday schedule is coming up. So January 4th, we are not going to have a governance call. So we're going to update the calendars. We're going to post this in the repo. You might see this come through on Slack, but just be known, you hear it first. January 4th, no call. Week immediately following on 11th, the cycle will resume. We'll be back on the notary's call on the 11th. Now, to the point on feedback, as you see these FIPs come across, it's really important that we're capturing the journey for notaries as well as clients. So in the coming days and weeks, you might see, actually you will see, an outreach from me. We're going to be trying to get signal from you. What do you think about certain initiatives? How do you communicate? What we're trying to do is make sure that we're coming from a place that really communicates in a way that captures your signal. So stand by, you'll see that interview request come through. And the last, just keeping you updated on the status of the leadership notary board, that's coming. So the RFP is going out in the next coming days and weeks as well. So what this will do is give an actual display of how we stand and where we're working, and you can actually see what deals are coming through. So if you have any questions, please let me know here on this call, in chat, or in the repos. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Deep's over there writing a new FIP as well as minting some NFTs for us. There are some open discussion topics. Want to hit on this one. DataCap distribution expectations across multiple storage providers. Like Deep mentioned, we heard from Ecology specifically. So they're an LDN number 36, as well as Shinshu LDN number 79. Those have been flagged as needs diligence, partially because in their application, they said they were going to be able to make a certain amount of deals with a certain amount of providers. What we have seen so far with their deal making behavior does not match that. And so we paused it to sort of have a chance for notaries to weigh in. So I would be curious. I would encourage you guys to go, once these get posted, and listen to Ecology Limited speak for themselves. But also they have been replying to comments in their issue, and Shinsu has been replying to comments in their issue as well. So we want to hear from the notaries on whether or not we feel comfortable removing that diligence label and starting a new allocation request, or if we think that we still have questions for them. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to wait here like 3 seconds to see if anyone has an immediate thought on either of these, or it's this parent issue. Okay, not seeing hands, so I'm just going to encourage you guys to go check out this discussion 319 and those two specific LDNs. The other one that has come up around reducing the constraints on requesting additional data cap. This one is a little bit easier to talk through. Part of the problem is some out-of-date documentation around how the bots are currently functioning to request subsequent allocations. It says that it needs to be 90%. This isn't actually true anymore. It's the subsequent allocation bot is supposed to kick off when they have they've used 75% of their allocation. Specifically for textile, there were a couple technical issues that came up that sort of have like led to some of this brainstorming. Good ideas here overall. If there are some questions, comments, or concerns on discussion 321, I'm going to pause for a second.
I think one of the takeaways from this was just like we need to update some of the docs too, right? Given we're running a little bit behind on that, so we got to prioritize that a little bit. It's a good takeaway. Jennifer's got a question in the chat that's not related to this, which is what expiration period does the Fplus community need right now for DataCap? Jen, that's a great question. I think we should go see some data before we answer that on like latent DataCap. Like what is the longest we've seen a client not use DataCap? If there's a way to get that data, we probably could. So let's look at that first and then come back with a reasonable response to you.
Yeah, I would also say that a question with that is like, this came up this morning. If a client, what do we define as inactive, right? If a client has asked for DataCap, and let's say they get 32 GIB in, March, and that client goes on to not use that 32 GIB, but they got more DataCap, they're making deals, they just haven't used that amount. Is that an inactive client or not? Where is the threshold of activity? Is it on any message, any deal making, or is it on, a specific amount of DataCap? I think that a starting point might be saying, if a client address gets an amount of DataCap and does nothing for X amount of time, revoke that DataCap. That's like a very clear, to me, inactive client. But it does just bring up a question, like, what if they're making deals, they're just not using their DataCap? Should we revoke that DataCap or wait? So some questions there. You've got real close to the camera. He's gonna like give a strong opinion about something. No, okay. There was also another sort of placeholder discussion. Deep, did you want to touch on this one or save it since we didn't get a chance to talk about it this morning and we don't have the discussion topic yet?
Yeah, I think Jennifer actually kicked off the discussion topic for this as number 324 between today morning's call and today evening's call. So we should probably do a quick discussion on it if we have the time. Galen, do we have the time? Okay, cool. And we can catch people up in Slack after. But TLDR is basically clients can use multiple types of addresses, of course, but between F1, F2, F3 addresses, we see a variety of all three coming in. Unfortunately, some come in with F2 only to realize that after getting DataCap, they can't use those addresses in making deals today. So even there, like removing DataCap and reissuing it would be helpful. But between F1 and F3, it turns out that there are implications to that decision. And so there's an ask from some of the folks that work on markets for Filecoin to say maybe we should consider pushing clients to using F1 based addresses as opposed to F3 ones because it results in a higher published deals message cost to a storage provider, thereby making the likelihood of batch deal making at scale with storage providers even trickier. And given that there is some friction there today with like getting deal making done at scale reliably for clients, this could be one incentive mechanism that could be used to help with that. Jen, do you want to share a little bit more details on this, so that we can get this recorded as well to share with the folks that aren't in this session?
Of course. Yeah, thank you for the background context. It's actually like very accidental. Like we just get bored and started to look at the guest trace of like published storage deal like one day in a Lotus call we have, and then we found out like this exact message we randomly picked. Like a lot of the like guest usage are used for like signature verification, which is like we realize is caused by the BLS wallet address, and it costs like 10x more than like the signature verification for the step 256K1 wallet address. Now related enough, so as we all know, the community member has been sharing opinion that like, you know, public storage deal message being like expensive, like very gas costly, has been a pain point for them to onboarding clients or like control the base cost. We even have a FIP from, I believe it's like Matrix Storage. It's like FIP discussion like 2112 specifically ask, you know, to reduce the PSD message like gas cost. The proposal here, I have like left my opinion there, like how it may cause, you know, attack factor for the network or whatever, but a very simple thing to do to actually reduce this message, the cost for the storage provider is for client to use set like 256K wallet address instead of BLS. But yeah. So we are hoping like starting from, you know, a lot of the deal from the network right now is coming from like verified deal, which is a thing coming from the Filecoin Plus program. And we are hoping to work with the Filecoin Plus community, including the verified client and Notary to, you know, starting save some gas for the storage provider, which can, you know, potentially even lower the ask price from the storage provider in the long term, in the future. And the ask is pretty simple. It's like whenever a client is like start to request for like DataCap, use a F1 address, don't use a F3 address. And there should be no other like, you know, lost here for the clients.
Yeah, but we do need to get some data gen based on what we talked about on how F1 addresses can also end up resulting in being slightly more expensive, like tiny bit for certain operations. And so just making sure that we're transparent about that would be good.
Definitely be sharing more like more data, but like it's like 300,000 like gas cost, which is like based on the price today, it's like 0.00002 cents in a way, but like definitely we'll be sharing more data.
Sweet. Thank you. If you don't mind, I think this is a good discussion. Let's chat about it further on GitHub. Encourage folks to go read this and ask any questions that you have. TLDR, even making the recommendation is probably pretty low lift for us as a community and something we can be supportive of. I think it becoming a requirement is certainly a little bit trickier and a little more controversial, but it being a recommendation is probably like reasonable from like a Fplus scope side of things. So notaries that are in the room, take a look, see what you think, see how it impacts your client experience. Given that we have 4 minutes left, Galen, maybe we need to pop back. I don't know, unless we can talk about these further. Up to you.
That was the one on the head. I will also say that I thought that in the zeitgeist of things, blockchains that have very expensive gas fees are really popular. Am I misunderstanding that? Is that there's one that comes to mind where the gas fees seem to be discussed very often. So I thought that would be a pro, but maybe I'm misunderstanding. All press is good press. No, all joking aside, though, I think that this is an interesting thing to bring up, and it does have ramifications. I tend, in this instance, I do agree with Deep that making, as a community, making a request to a client seems good, and telling them kind of the situation versus making it a parameter that says, in order to be verified, you must have a certain type of address. And so thinking through, are there other ways that we could approach solving this? And maybe it's something to the extent of, are there other ways to subsidize or calculate gas fees? And just all of these hurdles are opportunities to also think creatively too, right? So
that's actually like, yeah, because this is like recorded, so I want to be like very clear that like at least for like Lotus team and the protocol dev team that is at like protocol labs, we have been like wanting to prioritize, looking into public storage deal message, how we can optimize that, how we can make the deal onboarding price like cheaper for the storage provider in the long term. Like in the past couple months, and there are more investigation like going on these days. However, most of them needs a lot of research, and protocol changes. So this exact thing is one immediate action doesn't need a protocol change and can easily be done with some of the help from the community. And we do feel like it brings net positive impact for both like clients and storage provider in general. It's not a long-term solution for sure, but yeah.
I think for us, like Jen, the number one priority has been like the client experience right now, where it's like we need to make sure that the client onboarding experience is as painless as possible. So I think some due diligence that we probably need to do together as well will probably be like what is the actual snapshot state today of like, I don't even know off the top of my head like the ratio of people that are using like F1 versus F2 versus F3 addresses, for example. Like I don't know how many would be impacted. There's also an aspect of like, to Meg's point earlier on, like in the client like journey where they come through this path, how many of them already have an address that's already activated versus how many don't have one and are getting activated. So a good example of this is like the automated verifier can actually be used to activate addresses on chain, right? So like people go to verify.glyph.io with a new address, request automated DataCap, and then that gives them legitimacy on the network. That is a very interesting, like probably high leverage data point to educate a client to say, hey, you're entering in this kind of address. This has these implications. Or like in our documentation, we need to do a better job of this, but we often link off to like generic like Lotus docs. So like make sure you put them in those Lotus docs as well, or like other like implementations have like respective documentation too, where this is a little bit more transparent. I think we could benefit from in the community because that also reduces the net effort per notary per client, right? Because per application, like having a notary educated client is very difficult. But pointing to a piece of documentation that says, "Hey, please consider this," becomes extremely easy. And so I would basically like I would like to take this discussion in a way of like, how can we do this in a low friction way, and then how do we have the data to prove that it's actually worth the time?
And the sun is setting here in California, and it is now 5 p.m. We are at time, so wanted to thank everybody for joining. This will be recorded, posted online. Plenty of links in here for other discussion. Please go check out those GitHub issues, FIPS discussion issues in our repos, and share your opinions there. So thanks everybody. And as Kay mentioned, be looking out for some surveys and interviews. So great. Thanks everyone.